Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. And as you may be able to see, we are in a new filming location. In fact, we have finally moved house. It's official, it's done. You may also notice that I seem to be off centre. And there's a very good reason for that, because for today I have got a very, very special guest who's going to be joining me. And that is going to happen, I hope, through the aid of movie magic. It's my husband, Jamie!
I was making tea 2 seconds ago.
Well, of course, what you don't know is that when you get conferred with a doctorate, you also get given special magical powers, so I can just summon you.
So you're a witch?
But you already knew that.
Didn't want to say it in public.
So, in addition to being hilarious, my husband is also incredibly patient and long-suffering, and he is also a film buff. So I thought that for a new series, we could start talking about films that we've been to see. Me as a historian and him as a film buff. And we recently went to go and see The Favourite, which is about the reign of Queen Anne. And it has been out for a while, so I am going to put a spoiler alert on this, but I think we're okay because it was out from December, so it's been going on for quite a while. And I just thought we'd talk about what we thought of the film. So, let's go. You've seen far more films in your life than I have.
I've seen a few.
When we were first dating, we used to play the game of, he'd say, have you seen that? And I'd say, well, are we really going to play the have you seen that game? Because chances are I have not seen that film. So you have seen an enormous catalogue of films. In terms of the cinematography, the costume, the casting, how effective did you find The Favourite in its, I suppose, storytelling? Is that what you're looking for when you go and see a film?
Kind of. I found the costume in particular fascinating. I probably should explain this by saying I don't usually look at period dramas.
Okay.
It's not a subject matter that I would choose to go watch at the cinema. If I had the opportunity to see it on DVD or on a flight, yeah, probably would make the effort. But it's not normally something I go to the cinema for. You gave me no choice. So I went, and I'm glad. Now, coming back to the costumes and what they tried to get away with, and that was maintaining, if I understand correctly, maintaining the silhouette of women of the time, but doing it in a very cost-effective way.
Yes. From what I understand, there are some actually really great articles on the choices that made in costuming. The companies behind The Favourite chose to film in incredibly prestigious locations. So there's Hampton Court Palace, Hatfield House. These are all places that, frankly, require a big budget. And from what I understand, the decision was made to create the correct Baroque silhouette, but in a way that was, I suppose, cut price without reducing quality. So the silhouettes, to me, I'm not an expert in costume and its detailing, but certainly the silhouettes look pretty spot on to me. But what I thought was really interesting was for the servants and those of the lower orders, the costumes are made out of denim, and I believe that actually they were sourced from kind of pre-worn or used jeans. So that's what that's made out of. So they went to a thrift shop and cut up jeans, whereas the court is in a monochrome palette, so it's blacks and whites, and it's these large, elaborate prints. So it's incredibly differentiated between high and low in a way that I actually think, the cost saving aside, I think to a modern audience we can read that. We know what denim is, and then we look at these elaborate other fabrics and we can recognise what they are too.
And actually, you told me beforehand it was denim.
Yes.
And knowing that, you could see it. I'm not sure if you didn't know that everybody below stairs was wearing denim, would you have picked up on it when watching the film? Or would you just said, well, they're wearing some kind of blue uniform or dress?
Yeah.
So it didn't detract from it in any way at all.
You did mention a really interesting thing that you sort of noticed about the costume choice, particularly for Sarah Churchill character.
Yes. As Sarah Churchill's relationship with Queen Anne seems to deteriorate, that is the first time we see the Sarah Churchill character, who at the beginning of the film is almost schooling Abigail Hill. A lot of those lessons take place whilst they're shooting. We see Sarah Churchill's character wearing trousers and what appears to be like a riding jacket. Now, she's only seen wearing those in Abigail Hill's company until we see the relationship between Queen Anne and Sarah Churchill starts to deteriorate. And then we see Sarah Churchill in the Queen's presence wearing those clothes as well. Is she then trying to state that I should be the man in your life?
Yeah.
By wearing what could be considered as male clothing?
Yeah. I mean, there were some choices that I don't know if it's the scriptwriter or the director made, but for example, while we see Sarah Churchill's husband, he is present, we don't see Anne's. Anne is married, she does have a husband, but he has been erased from this film. Now, what I think is quite clever about the film is that it doesn't offer a date. We know that we're moving through a reign because time is elapsing, but we're never given a specific date as to when we are seeing these characters in action. But certainly at the early part of the reign, so in history, for example, Abigail Hill enters Queen Anne's bedchamber as a woman of the bedchamber just after her coronation in 1702. So presumably, what we are seeing then, if Abigail Hill is making her way up from kitchen maid, which she never was, but never mind, if she's making her way up into the bedchamber, then it must start at the beginning of Anne's reign. Well, her husband George is still alive then, but he does not feature at all. And I have an idea of why that may be happening, but I wonder, I suppose cinematically, why might that choice have been made?
This was a story about women told through the portrayal of three women on film. And men complicated the matter. There are four male characters who do appear quite frequently in the film, and they appear quite frequently with a degree of ridicule, and they have very specific purposes.
Yes.
And they are very much exploited.
Yeah, they are presented as being incredibly effeminate. They are heavily made up, bewigged in these incredibly flamboyant costumes. There is a pared back minimalism in the female representation that isn't present in the male representation. The men are almost clownish.
Yes. Which put alongside the very serious women.
Yes.
Just goes again to demonstrate the fact that there is a very clear female message to be told here.
Yes.
A very female story to be told.
And I personally find that incredibly powerful and evocative. For me, there were moments that were potentially more questionable than others. Just staying out there, I really enjoyed the film. I would recommend it. What do you think?
Yes, I recommend it. If you enjoy seeing creative film work.
Creative film work, yes.
This is a great example of what imagination can do with what is actually a fairly straightforward story. It's by no means exceptional. There's no superhero feat to it. But the storytelling makes it a story worth telling.
Yes. And I also think that actually the superhero feat is taking somebody who has arguably been a forgotten monarch. We all hear about the Merry Monarch, Charles II. He's returned from the continent, and then something happens, and there's a revolution, but nobody dies, and there's no bloodshed, and there's some kings and queens, blah, 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 and then we get the Hanoverians, and then it's all Georgians, and everybody hates each other. And I think that between Charles II and the Hanoverians, we sort of lose that history, and Queen Anne is almost completely forgotten.
It is probably something of a footnote in our primary school study of Tudors and Stuarts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost.
Because I think that's the telling thing, is that when Queen Anne comes to the throne, she must be on some level aware that she is the last of her house, unless her exiled half-brother is to come back onto the throne. She is the last Protestant offering from the House of Stuart that could possibly sit on the throne of England. And I wonder what that does to a person. In terms of the history of Queen Anne, what did you know before, I suppose, I started talking to you about the film?
She was Stuart.
I should point out that my husband was actually educated for the majority of his teenage years in France. Now, do they cover the Stuarts in French school?
We did history.
What did you cover? I take it you didn't cover English monarchs in France.
Not really.
It was all a bit revolution, right?
Yeah, we did a lot about revolution.
So your knowledge of history, despite the fact that you learnt it, it's French history that you know the best, probably.
Yes, my knowledge of British history stopped in year 7.
Wow, okay. So your knowledge, you knew that Queen Anne was a Stuart. Anything else?
She was followed by the Hanoverians.
Yes, the Georges.
She had lots of children, but none of them survived.
Yes.
And they all looked pretty ridiculous.
In what way did they look ridiculous?
The wigs, the clothes, the makeup.
Okay.
The pageantry, the statements, they all looked very ridiculous. And they built a lot of West London. Or is that the ones that came afterwards?
No, a lot of West London. That is, that's George IV does the whole kind of Regent Street and all of that stuff.
The part of London I just don't go to.
Right, okay. The bit you avoid.
Yeah.
So that's a fairly good knowledge of Queen Anne before going to the film. I think that's probably actually quite a lot higher than a lot of people. I think she has been one of, I suppose, history's losers when it comes to being remembered and talked about. She doesn't have the same, I suppose, murderous quality as a Henry VIII, or that sort of rabble-rousing that an Elizabeth I generates, or, the million years widow that was Victoria. These are queens and monarchs that stick in the memory. And I think, for some reason, Anne has been somewhat forgotten. And I hope, actually, that The Favourite moves some way to changing that. Now, it's not historically perfect. As we mentioned, the costumes are using different fabrics. They do add in bits and pieces that aren't accurate or that there aren't any evidence for. For example, there is a lot made of Queen Anne's bunny rabbits in the film. We have no evidence that she kept cages full of bunny rabbits, and had she kept these cages of bunny rabbits, in the film she has 17 rabbits. Now, they claim this is because she lost 17 children. Well, as far as I'm aware from the records, she may have had 17 pregnancies, but in those 17 pregnancies, 19 children were produced.
Although at the end of the film there does appear to be a lot more rabbits.
Yes, but she's quite specific that they are 17 for her lost ones. Well, there should have been 19, which, only because I'm a pedant, I find problematic. But they also did things, for example, there is a moment where there is some duck racing, which is apparently supposed to replace a planned cockfighting because they were told that was too cruel. And while cockfighting is historically accurate, and from what we know, duck racing almost certainly isn't, I think in it you get a sense of the hysteria, the almost ridiculousness that I think comes at the end of an era, when it's the dying moments of the House of Stuart on the throne of England, and there is something, I think, much as you would see in sort of just pre-revolutionary France, where everything becomes incredibly over the top because people have this sense of something coming to an end. So I suppose my question is, because knowing what I know about the period, I find it quite easy to go, okay, well, that's fact and that's made up and that's conjecture. Maybe that happened. There's no proof. But I can enjoy it. I'm not one of those people necessarily that will sit and watch something and go, well, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Unless it is such a leap that I can't understand why that choice has been made. So, for example, in The Tudors, I don't know why Henry's sister is married to the ageing King of Portugal in The Tudors, when in real life Henry's sister was married to the ageing King of France. I don't see the necessity of exchanging France for Portugal. It didn't make any sense in the narrative. It was just incorrect history for it just felt poorly researched. I don't know why they did that.
I think in terms of, if we're talking about the Tudors being interesting, I think it's interesting they made the last 2 seasons from start.
Well, they had to get through to the bitter end, because unfortunately, as I said earlier, no spoilers, but frankly, I think when we talk about historical films, it's like if you watch the Titanic and someone tells you the boat sinks. That isn't a spoiler. that's history. But I wonder, as somebody who isn't as immersed in history as I am, coming away from that film, what is the story of Queen Anne? Who is Queen Anne in your mind, having watched that film?
Just on that film alone?
Yeah. What, as if you knew nothing about Queen Anne, if this was your learning, because I suppose that's the thing that historians say, is that if people only encounter a character or an event through a certain film and it is incorrect or just flat out wrong from start to finish, what is the effect on how people view history? So if you only had that film, what assumptions or what would you take away as being facts about Queen Anne and her England?
She was a very tragic woman. I'd say she was a very tragic woman in a very complex time where there is so much change going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very male-dominated world.
Yep.
And yet she was a woman with pretty much unrivaled power, certainly in her surroundings. And they are drifting into a degree of absurdity which is only ever going to end in tears. But then their story had already been punctuated by tears because of, the Civil War had occurred.
Yep.
And they do make reference to their relationship with France.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Queen Anne is a very tragic woman in a very tragic world that is surrounded by the absurd, when actually what I think she probably needed was some normalcy and care.
I suppose it's interesting to me that you talk about Queen Anne as a tragic figure. That's your takeaway from the film. And I think that actually, for me, there's an element to which the film does Anne a disservice. Because I think when you look at Abigail Hill or Sarah Churchill, it's interesting to me that you didn't pin them down. It wasn't like Abigail's a schemer, Sarah's a megalomaniac. That wasn't the way you saw it.
No, and I think that's what makes it slightly more interesting than conventional history.
Yeah.
People are not just one thing.
No.
As much as cinema likes to sometimes try and convince us that people are. These are incredibly complex times, and times are made complex by complex people.
Yeah. I suppose my concern is that the least complex of them is the figure of Queen Anne. And I understand, because she isn't the cultured woman that Sarah Churchill is, who reads Shakespeare and Dryden and speaks Latin and is overtly political.
Yes.
And has her fingers in all of the pies. So she's moving in party politics, she's trying to steer the war effort, she sees herself as Prime Minister, General, Chief Confidant, and all of these things are factually accurate. Sarah Churchill certainly does do these things. She also had an explosive temper. There was a time where she fell out with her husband. He did something she didn't like. And so, to spite him, she cut off all her hair in front of him and threw it on the floor and stormed out of the room. this may be apocryphal, but it has been reported to me, and it has been in quite a lot of sources, that apparently after his death, she opened his cabinet and she found that he'd collected up all the hair and tied it in a bow to keep it.
I would collect your hair if you threw it at me in anger. If you cut off your hair and you threw it at me in anger, I would keep it.
That's incredibly sweet, but I don't think I would ever be moved to the sort of fit of pique where I'd literally cut my hair off to spite my face. But that is an element of the woman that Sarah is, and I think that those kinds of moments of just unbridled fury, but also political composure. She is all of these things in real life. And I think it comes across in the film that she is prone to these outbursts of passion, but also has the clear-eyed political mind to move in quite scheming ways. I suppose my concern is that Anne, in some ways, is the most one-dimensional of the characters. And yes, she has this incredibly tragic life that we don't think she ever really completely gets over the guilt of what happens to her father during the Glorious Revolution, that he is removed from his throne and exiled. Her sister and her sister's husband, when they are on the throne, treat her quite poorly. She is overridden and overshadowed by Sarah Churchill, who's constantly barking orders at her and insulting her and telling her in public sometimes to shut up. And she has all these pregnancies that don't result in a child that lives past 10, I believe. In fact, she comes to the throne in 1702 and her last surviving child had died in 1700, a boy, and he had reached the age of 10. She's suffering from gout, she's quite overweight, and I think it's the portrayal of her as being somebody who collapses in Parliament and who is, it's all just a little bit too much, and that she's not quite clever or quick enough. I don't think she had Sarah Churchill's sharp tongue and capacity to think on her feet verbally, but she is a woman who is interested, and she's a woman who cares about her nation. Queen Anne, I don't think you know this, Queen Anne went to more meetings with her political councillors than any other monarch, any other Stuart monarch.
Good.
She is at all of these council meetings. She isn't somebody who is uninterested in political events. She is at all of them. She wants to remain informed. She also finds the notion of party politics, the Whigs and the Tories at the time, she's deeply suspicious of this partisan split in government. And she also thinks it's ridiculous that when she is selecting her council of advisors, she can't select the best people. And if that's half Whig, half Tory, if they're the best people for the job, that should be who's advising her. She can't understand why, just because somebody is in power, she has to change the people that's been advising her. She also is concerned that if men are part of a party, and of course it's all men at this time, that they will put party before nation. Which to me, with what we're living through,
Yeah.
Queen Anne actually had it right, that party politics can become a great evil of the nation. And the one criticism that I have of the film, because I do think it was beautiful and I'm so pleased that I saw it, and I also think that it's a film that is going to be one of those films about historical period that's going to be constantly referred to as, oh, if you're studying the Baroque period, watch The Favourite. But my one caveat is that Queen Anne is more than this fainting hysteric that she's presented as. And with knowing what I've just told you there, do you think that the film's a bit unfair to her?
Quite possibly, yes. She does come across as a very tragic character.
Yeah.
And very much at the mercy of these two other women, as well as obviously all the men who are trying to manipulate her into doing what they want her to do. Does she come across as the most tragic of the three? Yes. Is it as simple as that? No.
No.
Thankfully, it helps add to what is a very, very enjoyable film.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that a lot of times where historical films go wrong is they attempt to oversimplify, they attempt to create heroes, and you can't do that because historical figures are real people, and real people are neither heroes nor villains. And nobody thinks of themselves as a mustachioed, twirling villain. Everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. So I really enjoyed making this video. I certainly enjoyed going to see the film with you because we got to have burgers in the Everyman. It was fun times.
Yes.
And so that's, of course, a bonus for next time. It's a great date night out to go to the cinema. So we'll certainly do that again. And you're going to come back and help me review Mary Queen of Scots, right?
Yes, I will come back.
Thank you very much. And I do hope, in fact, we both hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do click the like button so we know that you've liked it. And also remember those comments in the comment section down below about other films that you'd like us to review. If you've got a hot tip of one that's coming up in the near future, let us know down there. Also, please do subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so that YouTube tells you when I've next uploaded. And I will look forward to seeing you all in the next video. You look forward to seeing them all in the next film review video?
Yes.
Perfect. And I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and that you look after yourself. Do take care. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.